A newly circulated image showing a disc-shaped object near the moon's surface is igniting intense online debate and speculation that there's extraterrestrial activity beneath the lunar crust. The photograph captured a smooth, metallic craft hovering near a deep lunar crater, and it has quickly become one of the most discussed images among ufologists and enthusiasts.
And it has very distinct features of a satellite dish. It's got the dish itself, the crater shape, it's got a long spike that appears to come out of the middle, all sorts of stuff that looks exactly like a satellite dish on Earth looks.
The object was positioned against the stark blackness of space, and it seems to be elongated and symmetrical, with a flattened oval profile. Unlike the natural celestial bodies, the craft's surface seems to be polished and uniform, reflecting faint light along its curved edges. Its shape stands in sharp contrast to the moon's rugged, cratered terrain visible to the right of the frame. It revealed a circular depression on the moon that some say might be an entry point to a subterranean structure. Some ufologists have said that the image might be a craft descending toward an underground base hidden beneath the moon's surface. The positioning of the object relative to the crater shows that there's deliberate movement rather than chance alignment. They argue that since the moon's far side and subsurface regions have been unexplored, there are unanswered questions about what might exist below.
Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface. Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, "They're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us."
For decades, there have been theories that space agencies have encountered anomalies during lunar missions that were never fully disclosed to the public. This image has reignited claims that certain findings from the previous missions to the moon have been hidden by NASA.
That is music even sounds outer spacey, doesn't it? Do you hear that whistling sound?
But when you look at the unexplained structures of the spaceship, the unusual shadow patterns, and the electromagnetic readings in past lunar surveys, it's clear that there's something strange happening beneath the surface of the moon. Some skeptics have noticed that the object in the image might be the result of optical distortion, digital manipulation, or a satellite caught at an unusual angle. The harsh contrast between the moon's illuminated edge and the darkness of space creates visual artifacts that appear structured or mechanical. Experts are looking at the strange smoothness and aerodynamic symmetry of the object that was captured beside the moon. Unlike space debris or typical satellites that usually display angular components such as solar panels or antennae, the craft in the image seems to be seamless, and it doesn't seem to be man-made. What side are you on, the skeptics or the ufologists? Do you think this is a real or fake image? Viewer skepticism is recommended. There are a lot of UFO stories that we question and wonder how much truth is in the matter. But this one stands out.
I am not this body in terms of consciousness, and consciousness can go places where the body cannot.
Ingo Swann's claim. It all started with Ingo Swann, an American author and self-described psychic who became one of the most talked-about figures in discussions of government paranormal research. Most people know him for his participation in what is now known as the CIA's remote viewing projects. He's a series of classified experiments in the 1970s and 80s that explored whether individuals could use extrasensory perception to gather information at a distance. He was involved in different programs, and it was later confirmed in declassified documents. But what kind of UFOs did Swann see? And was there really a UFO on the moon? He spoke about this in 1998 in his book titled Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy, and that brought him widespread attention well beyond the remote viewing community. In this book, he made a shocking claim, which is that, during one of his assignments, he was tasked by a secretive government handler to view the far side of the moon, a hemisphere permanently hidden from Earth's view. According to Swann's account, he saw artificial structures, activity, no and even non-human inhabitants in the hidden landscape on the far side of the moon. These assertions have changed our understanding of the moon and the presence of extraterrestrial life. Swann's narrative is dramatic and seems like a mix of spy thriller and science fiction, with mysterious government figures, secret facilities, and deep space consciousness projection. His psychic experiments started when he was young, and researchers realized that there was something strange about him. Early psychic experiments.
He's Ingo Swann, artist and psychic. He feels that he can project himself up towards the ceiling so he can look from above in the tray and see what's there. Then he feels he's coming back to his body and he makes a sketch of what he has seen in the tray. Sometimes he does it with amazing degree of accuracy. Of course, we are trying to find out how it works in a scientific experiment. Janet Mitchell, my assistant right now, is connecting Ingo Swann to polygraph. Polygraph will record what is going on in his body when he performs the out-of-body tasks.
Okay, Ingo. We're almost ready to go. Is everything all right?
Everything's fine.
Okay, if you want me, just call.
Okay.
During the run of the experiment, very careful records are kept on any changes occurring in Ingo's body, particularly changes occurring in the electrical characteristics of his brain.
Okay, I'm finished.
The data from the polygraph is carefully analyzed for any physiological evidence of Ingo actually projecting his consciousness out of the body when he viewed the target object.
We have already found that it really seems he can see the objects in the tray suspended from ceiling from an out-of-body point of view. We have also found already that his brain waves decrease in voltage right here, back of his head. It might mean that the brain is more quiet at the time when he is out and resume full activity and he is back in. We'll know more for sure next year.
His early forays into paranormal research were rooted in lab experiments that aimed to test the reality of extrasensory perception and related phenomena long before the CIA became involved. In the early 1970s, Swann started volunteering for controlled testing with the American Society for Psychical Research, where he was connected to equipment and EEG monitors to track his physiological state while trying to perceive objects hidden from normal view. One memorable moment was when Swann described conditions inside a sealed box, even noting that the light meant to illuminate the target symbol was not working. They only confirmed this detail once they opened the box and realized he could actually perceive it. These early successes happened under conditions meant to minimize normal sensory cues. Swann was usually restrained and monitored to rule out any physical movement or peeking. But the fact that he could describe things inside a box, where he couldn't see, made him worthy of further study. Swann's performance in these trials caught the attention of scientists Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute, with a private research organization where work exploring human consciousness and anomalous perception was underway. In 1972, they began formal ESP and remote viewing experiments with him, and that was when he became a part of the Project Stargate research program funded by the U.S. government. He turned investigations into UFOs around when he carried out investigations into Jupiter, and what he saw turned out to be true. Remote viewing Jupiter. In 1973, one of the most unusual episodes in remote viewing research happened when Ingo Swann attempted to see the planet Jupiter from a room at the Stanford Research Institute using only his mind. Swann, seated under controlled conditions and given nothing more than astronomical coordinates, entered a meditative state and described features of the distant gas giant. And he said Jupiter had a dense and dynamic atmosphere with bands of color and crystal-like layers, intense storm activity, and even rings around the planet. Around that time, Jupiter had not been seen by anyone, and scientists had no proof about what he said. But they thought it was unlikely for this to be the case. What makes this claim stand out when talking about remote viewing is that many of the broad features that Swann described were later observed by NASA's spacecraft. In 1979, when the Voyager 1 probe flew past Jupiter, it revealed that the planet does indeed have a faint ring system composed of dust particles, invisible from Earth but unmistakable in spacecraft imagery. This was something Swann had mentioned years earlier in his session notes. Swann also spoke of turbulent atmospheric conditions, to such as powerful winds and layered cloud bands, which align with what the Voyager probes and subsequent missions confirmed about Jupiter's enormous storms and banded weather patterns. It was after he got this right that the CIA decided to secretly recruit him to find out more about outer space, especially asking the question of whether there's something alive on the moon and if NASA is hiding it. Secret government recruitment. In 1975, Ingo Swann's life took a dramatic turn when he claimed to be drawn into one of the most secretive corners of U.S. intelligence work. According to Swann, he received a mysterious phone call from Washington, D.C., alerting him that someone named Mr. Axelrod would soon contact him about a confidential mission. Not long after, Swann met this enigmatic figure, and what followed reads like the opening scene of a spy movie. He says he was quietly approached by men by helicopter to an undisclosed underground facility where his blindfold was finally removed. There, Axelrod explained that he was a part of a highly classified government operation with no official paper trail, and that Swann's talents could be of value to them. Swann described Axelrod as a government agent working outside normal bureaucratic channels. He explicitly told him not to ask questions and placed strict secrecy conditions on his work. He was offered significant compensation and instructed not to discuss the mission for at least 10 years. During their conversations, Axelrod and Swann talked about remote viewing protocols and the possibilities of psychic intelligence. This led to the assignment that Swann could later describe as an attempt to view the far side of the moon. While declassified records like those from the CIA confirm Swann's involvement in remote viewing research under programs that eventually became known as Project Stargate, there is no official evidence outside his own writings that a covert recruitment involving Axelrod and secret base flights ever took place. But ufologists are saying that if a classified investigation like this really happened, there would be no files under the CIA. So the fact that there's no other proof is still no proof. Still, Swann was called for remote viewing of the moon, and what he saw exposed something alive on the moon. Remote viewing the moon. In 1975, Ingo Swann described one of the most astonishing episodes of his psychic work as a remote viewer, and it was a vision of the far side of the moon, unlike anything NASA had publicly shown at the time. According to Swann, he was given a series of lunar coordinates and instructed to project his awareness onto the moon's surface from a secret government facility. What he reported went far beyond craters and dust. Swann said that, as he mentally landed at certain locations, he perceived tracks or tread-like marks on the lunar soil, as if machinery had traversed the surface, and unusual terrain patterns that suggested artificial movement rather than natural processes. He claimed to see structures that appeared geometric and organized, with towers, domes of varying sizes, bridges of unclear purpose, and what looked like machinery scattered across the far side. In one crater, he described a green haze, a phenomenon he interpreted as evidence of lighting phenomena inconsistent with the moon's expected vacuum conditions. That implied that there was some form of artificial illumination on the moon, probably made by aliens. At one point, Swann encountered what he interpreted as humanoid figures engaged in activity around these installations. Two of these beings that he saw on the moon actually turned and gestured toward the psychic observation. That was when he suddenly stopped the session, realizing that the aliens had spotted him. There's no physical evidence about his claims yet, as lunar missions and remote sensing never corroborated the presence of life on the moon. But no spaceships have been able to get to the far side of the moon yet, so there's no telling what's really there. After this shocking experience, the CIA tried to cover up everything, threatening Swann about whatever he saw and experienced, especially since he saw aliens and they perceived him. CIA warnings and secrecy. When Ingo Swann later published his dramatic account of remote viewing in his 1998 book, Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy, one of the most striking elements was the way he described how his handlers treated what he claimed to have seen. According to Swann, after he returned from a remote viewing session on the moon's far side, he spoke with the government agent who recruited him, who he called Mr. Axelrod. In their discussion, Swann said he asked why NASA or the U.S. military hadn't returned to the moon after the Apollo missions. In Swann's telling, the Axelrod replied that authorities had been told by these beings to stay away, and then added, "They are not friendly, are they?" This is proof of the ominous tone of secrecy that surrounded his mission. Swann remembered that after this encounter, he was barred from speaking publicly about the mission for at least 10 years. He honored this restriction until Penetration was published 2 decades later. This prohibition was part of the larger cloak of secrecy that Swann said he was expected to maintain. He wasn't allowed to discuss the details of the remote viewing session or even acknowledge its purpose until the agreed-upon period had passed. When hearing about Swann's partnerships with the CIA on Project Stargate, it might seem like sci-fi, but it has been documented in declassified CIA records, and although the specific claims about alien bases and hostile warnings can only be found in Swann's own accounts, not in the official government documents. That raises many questions, like is NASA hiding the secrets of the far side of the moon? And is there really an alien civilization hiding there that they don't want us to know about? Well, after Swann had that encounter with the alien, he noticed that someone was following him, and wasn't sure whether that person was on our planet. Other strange experiences. In the midst of remote viewing and secret government assignments, one shocking aspect was when Swann had an encounter with who he believed was an extraterrestrial disguised as a woman in a Los Angeles supermarket. He found himself drawn to a striking woman whose attire and presence was so arresting and he could not explain it. And he said he had physical and psychic reactions, a wave of goosebumps and intense nervous energy, as evidence that she was not merely human. Even stranger, while he was watching the woman, he noticed the sudden appearance of two familiar figures from his earlier covert assignments watching the woman closely. That was when Swann noticed that there was more at play. Around the same period, Swann remembered another time when he and his government contacts traveled to a remote northern location to witness a UFO emerging from a lake. In his account, a large triangular craft was seen rising from the water, emitting strange light patterns and interacting with its environment in ways that defy normal physics. This was another strange aspect that caused Swann to realize something was going on. What it was almost like he was being watched by aliens after they noticed him watching them on the moon. UFO encounter in wilderness. Ingo Swann also revealed something shocking in his book about a dramatic and unusual counter. He claimed that he saw an unidentified flying object while on a covert field trip in a wild northern setting, which seems to be somewhere in Alaska. According to Swann, he, Mr. Axelrod, and two operatives hiked into a remote wooded area to a lake where they were told to remain completely still and silent because they were detecting heat, noise, and motion. After waiting in silence, Swann described a gray fog rising off the lake that started to emit vivid colors. It was first neon blue and then angry purple. From this mist, a triangular-shaped craft seemed to materialize out of nowhere. So Swann remembered that it seemed to grow rather than fly into view and estimated it to be about 90 feet wide. Swann said this object hovered above the water, producing a strong wind and low-frequency pulsations, and, in his description, emitted ruby-red laser-like beams that struck trees and seemed to scan the surrounding area. According to his narrative, one of the operatives commented that the craft's beams were sensing biological heat and could target them, prompting Axelrod and the others to drag Swann to safety under a rock overhang. In Swann's telling, he also saw the lake's water being pulled upward toward the craft as it continued to expand. But this account only comes from Swann, and no other person has verified it. This means there are no documents, imagery, and eyewitness investigations confirming that this wilderness UFO encounter actually happened. That's why there's a lot of skepticism about his encounters and the remote viewing process, as many don't believe in what Swann says he has experienced. Skepticism. Ingo Swann's stories about secret psychic missions and alien activity on the moon spark fascination because they seem to blend covert government intrigue with unexplained phenomena. Yet when we look at his claims through the lens of modern scientific understanding and historical evaluation, a much more measured picture emerges. While documents declassified from the U.S. Army and CIA confirm that the Stargate project and its precursors did exist and did explore remote viewing as a concept. This research was part of a broader Cold War effort to determine whether psychic phenomena had intelligence value, not evidence of extraterrestrial bases on the moon. The project was ultimately terminated in 1995 because an independent evaluation concluded that remote viewing had not provided consistent, actionable intelligence for military or intelligence operations. From the standpoint of mainstream science, remote viewing itself is classified as a pseudoscientific concept. This means that, despite anecdotal reports of striking impressions about distant locations, there is no reproducible, controlled experimental evidence that remote viewing represents a real perceptual ability beyond normal sensory or cognitive processes. Psychologists and scientists who have examined the research point out that early experiments lacked sufficient controls and could not rule out simple explanations like inadvertent cueing or pattern fitting in vague descriptions. In rigorous tests with proper methodological safeguards, remote viewing failures outweigh successes and are not accepted as proof of psychic perception. Essentially, while Swann's involvement in government research is historically documented and adds an intriguing chapter to the story of Cold War science, there is no scientific verification that remote viewing works or that alien habitats exist on the moon. His claims remain speculative and rooted more in personal narrative than in established empirical evidence. Outro Ingo Swann seems to have seen something shocking on the far side of the moon, including aliens, civilization, buildings, and machinery. That raises the question of what's really on that side of the moon that we've not been able to see. Is NASA keeping this secret from us? What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.